A salt-laden wind prowled the high ramparts of Storm's End, keening like a half-remembered song in the emptied corridors. Far below, moon-washed breakers pounded the base of the ancient keep, their thunder muffled by thick walls of black durnstone. Inside, the solar candles guttered, lending orange halos to the iron rings that held them. Arya rocked back on her heels and watched her newborn son struggle toward breath. He was slick and small and furious, dark hair plastered to a brow already creased, tiny fists beating at the cold. For one heartbeat, she saw every road that had brought her here. The red keep stench, the quiet canals of Bravos, the mud of the Trident, the frozen hush of Hagsmire, and at every bend, death reaching for her. Now life lay in her arms instead, barely as long as her forearm, but heavier than ice or needle or any blade she had carried. Gendry, broad-shouldered in a smith's apron still dusted with coal, knelt beside her and whispered a name only she could hear. Dawn crawled up from the sea, bruised purple giving way to pale pewter. In the rookery, Maester Corrin eased a white raven into the wind, its wings flashing silver as it vanished over the battlements. His parchment bore but 7 words. A child of stag and wolf is born. The old man counted that omen worth the coppersmith king across the narrow sea had paid for a glass candle. Storm's End had known Baratheon heirs before, yet none whose mother traced her blood to Winterfell, and her secrets to the faceless vaults beneath Bravos. Corrin dipped quill for a second message, meant for Old Town. Prophecy often came wearing a jester's cap, Archmaester Peristan had written, but this one wore a crown of morning light. He sealed the scroll, and prayed the Citadel's own Ares would understand what seed had just pierced the shell of the realm. When summer gave way to a sullen autumn, the boy, named Robard as a nod to both Robert and Robb, learned to crawl with the stubborn fury of a badger. Arya refused nursemaids. She had ridden with Night's Watch rangers across barren snowfields and stalked Lannister outriders through river reeds. She would not surrender her child to soft hands and gossiping tongues. In the morning she balanced him on her hip while she sparred in the yard, wooden sword darting like a swallow's wing. At night she lulled him with stories of Nymeria's pack running ghost-like through the King's Road forests, of Syrio Forel dancing between blades in a tiled Bravosi court, of Jon Snow facing cold so deep the stars themselves turned brittle. Robard listened with wide gray eyes, absorbing every cadence. When he slept, his fingers twitched as though chasing wolves through shadow, and Arya smiled at the secret she alone had learned. Even in dreams, the boy hunted. Gendry forged a dagger for him the year the first teeth came in. The smith worked beside the hearth, bellows sighing, the anvil ringing bright enough to outshine any court singer's harp.watt. He folded steel upon steel, worked horn from a stag shed in the rainwood, and inlaid a thread of smoky quartz along the tang. Too early, Sansa chided on one of her rare visits from Winterfell, fur-lined cloak trailing pine scent. Let him grow before you arm him. Gendry only laughed. Sweat streaking soot across a jaw Arya liked to trace after darkness fell. Steel waits, he said. Hell find its weight when he's ready. Sansa kissed her nephew's brow and wondered aloud whether the Seven, or the old gods, had decided which crown the child might one day bear. Yet in that moment, Robard cooed at the smith fire's glow, and Sansa glimpsed a prince unshackled by sigils, born to hammer and hunt alike. Beyond the castle, the realm patched wounds that never truly closed. King Bran sailed south but seldom, preferring the haunted quiet of the Godswood at King's Landing to the bustle of his own council. He named Sir Davos as hand, and the Onion Knight stitched peace as best he could. Yet the Reach grumbled under new harvest tithes, the Iron Islands tested coasts left unguarded, and in Dorne, Lady Nemora Sand whispered of a scorpion throne untouched by dragons. Old Town's bells told warnings no raven carried. Lannister gold no longer gilded the crownlands, for their minds ran thin, and their heirs thinner still. The Lion of Lannisport prowled on desperate paws, while Storm's End hammered out shields from repurposed chains. Robard toddled through these tremors like a pup unaware of the kraken lurking beneath each swell. No one noticed when 2 shadowbinders from Ashai reached Maidenpool looking for a child of storm and snow. Robard's fourth winter fell hard and brittle, frosting sea spray into knives that clung to arrow slits. One evening, Arya stood on the parapet, cloak snapping, and watched an aurora shimmer green across the northern horizon. It reminded her of the wall's ghost lanterns, slippery as the memories she'd buried under layers of names. She imagined Jon out there, skin tingling beneath void black sky, maybe feeling the same tug. "Aunt Arya," said a page panting at her elbow, "the prince is missing." Her heart kicked like a startled horse. She found him in the kennels, curled beside a litter of hound pups, warm breath fogging straw-dyed beer. When she scooped him up, he murmured, "They were cold, mother." Her throat tightened. She carried him past the courtyard pyre where old shields burned down to embers and swore on those dying sparks that no chill, ice or steel, would touch him unharmed. The first blood spilled for his sake came sooner than she thought. During the spring tourney at Duskendale, Lord Bulwer's sworn swords grew drunk on arbor gold and wagered who could snatch a lock of Baratheon boy hair. They cornered the child behind the grandstand. He bit one on the thumb hard enough to draw crimson. Another raised a mailed fist. Arya's steel answered before the blow could land, needle's point pricking through wine-stained surcoat to the man's ribs. Gendry broke the second with a single ore-hardened punch. The melee dissolved into broken casks and broken bones. Lord Bulwer offered apologies in silver. Arya said nothing. She'd taken her payment in fear already etched onto every face present. That night she whispered, "Water dancer," mantras to Robard until his shivers stilled. He slept on her cloak while she wetted needle, and Gendry stood watch at the door, warhammer across his knees like a silent vow. Storm's End received the king's raven within a fortnight. Sir Davos' plain script bade Gendry and Arya to court so Bran might bestow formal titles. "Legitimacy," Gendry said, studying the seal. He no longer stammered over lordly words. Blacksmith's shoulders had broadened into a nobleman's bearing, but he still feared pomps and silks. Arya shrugged. "Take it or not, all the same to me. The shark only circles if you spill your own blood first." Gendry laughed until he saw her eyes, gray glassy with memory of glowing candled crypts and freckled princes who did not return. At last he nodded. Robard tugged his father's beard and declared he wanted a crown like the one on the letter, only bigger. Gendry ruffled his son's midnight hair. Soon the family set sail aboard the Stormcloud, her sails golden with the crowned stag, though Arya smuggled braided direwolf banners in their cabin trunk. King's Landing greeted them with chimney smoke and the sweet rotting scent of the black water. The Red Keep stood redder than ever in evening sun, yet its ramparts bristled more with wary crossbows than banners. Inside the throne room, Bran sat in a wheeled chair of carved weirwood, eyes pale as new ice. He welcomed Gendry with a smile that almost reached warmth. He greeted Robard by name, though they had never met. The hall hushed when the boy stared up at the Iron Throne and proclaimed, "That's a silly chair. You'd cut your bum." Laughter rippled, though not from Sir Tylan Lannister, who tightened his mouth like a purse. Bran's decree followed. Lord Gendry Baratheon of Storm's End, Lady Arya Stark of Winterfell, and their son to be styled Prince of Shipbreaker Bay until majority. Yet Bran's pale gaze lingered on Arya. "In another life," he said so softly only she caught it, "he ruled the ashes." She shivered despite the August heat. In Flea Bottom that night, a hooded woman pressed a black coin, iron on one side, weeping woman on the other, into a filthy beggar's palm. "Valar Morghulis," she told him, and the beggar nodded, though he had but 3 teeth. Across the city, a sellsword company called the Golden Company nursed grudges in silk taverns, counting ships and counting casks. Their paymaster spoke of dragons lost and sons found. Beyond the walls, fields burned so lords could sow again in spring. Smoke rose, ravens flew, rumors blurred. In the quiet between bells, Robard dreamed of a stag, crowned with ice antlers, pursuing a gray direwolf along a road of skulls that stretched from Winterfell to Sunspear. When he woke, he asked Arya whether wolves ever walked alone. She stroked his cheek and answered truthfully, "Only those who choose to forget the pack." 2 years plunged by like stones through black water. Robard grew into a boy of lithe limbs and quick, smiling wit. He split mornings between Master Corin's grammar and the yard where Gendry trained him with blunted sword and shield. Of Arya he learned secrets no maester taught. How to move when you must not be seen, where to aim on a man's throat so a whisper kills. At 7, he could climb Storm's End's belly-curved walls faster than most grown squires. At 8 he lined up his mother's wooden ducks on a parapet and skewered all but one with a single smooth cast of spear. The miss angered him. He spent an hour retrieving it from the angry sea until bruises marbled his shins purple. When Arya found him, his eyes were wet, but not with fear. He feared nothing, only failing. She wrapped a cloak around his shoulders and thought, "The realm will forgive many sins, save weakness." A hush fell over Westeros when Bran the Broken died in his sleep. A raven perched upon the window lattice, as though it had escorted him to whatever green world lay beyond. His small council scattered. Sir Davos retired to Cape Wrath, Samwell Tarly to Horn Hill. A conclave of lords assembled at Harrenhal, each throne seat claimant wielding parchment pedigrees like sabers. Sansa came south with northern levies. Yara sailed upriver on black-winged longships. The Dornish prince rode with 6 viper banners and a poet. Gendry chose to stay at Storm's End, a decision half the realm deemed cowardice and the other half prudence. But Arya mounted a pale mare and set her course for Harrenhal, putting Robard before her in the saddle. She had crossed half the world. She could cross half the realm again if it meant steering Destiny's reins out of fools' hands. The old gods, if they bothered with thrones, could well shove. Harrenhal's blasted towers clawed the sky like burnt fingers, yet its lower halls thrummed with life. Tapestries covered melted stones, candles softened iron scars. The great courtyard overflowed with banners. Kraken, rose, sun and spear, hare, griffin, even a 3-headed dragon long thought extinct, black on red stitched new. In this forest of sigils, Arya walked unseen, blade at her wrist, boy at her side. Robard's eyes danced between colors, but Arya whispered lessons against glory's seduction. The lords met in a horseshoe of carved chairs. Speeches flared and failed like tinder and rain. Some argued for an elective throne each generation. Others for bloodlines as old as Valyria. Still others for fracturing the realm so no throne would exist. 3 times names were shouted. Tyrell Martell Redwine, each time drowned in jeers. On the 4th day, Sir Tylan rose and named Lord Gendry Baratheon. Bastards made princes, made lords could bind the realm in humility. The uproar crackled like wildfire. Sansa spoke for Gendry's honesty, Yara for his salt-bred courage, the Dornish for his lack of dragons. Yet an older voice cut through, a rasp like pages turning. Maester Corin had traveled from Storm's End unbidden. He bowed stiffly and produced the white raven notice from Robard's berth. He read it aloud, then lowered his hood. Gray hair spilled to his shoulders. His eyes shone with the fervor of a believer who has glimpsed the divine. "The child carries stag and wolf. Yes," he declared, "but also Smith's fire and faceless shadow. He is the hinge on which the realm will turn." Laughter greeted prophecy, yet it faltered when Arya stepped forward, direwolf pin glinting. She pushed Robard into the circle. He did not shrink. He met each lord's gaze like an equal, boots square, shoulders back. In his right hand, he held the dagger Gendry had forged years earlier. In his left, a wooden wolf carved from Winterfell hearttree. Sir Tylan scoffed. "Pretty toys. Will toys hold the Riverlands when the Reach marches?" Robard turned the dagger hilt first toward him. "Only if a lion's paw is steady." The hall fell silent. Arya's breath caught, her son's humor being his surest blade. The Lannister eyed the dagger's edge, then returned it without remark. Robard turned to the Dornish prince. "My mother says sand is many knives hidden in silk, but even sand can forge glass bright enough to show a man's true face." The prince inclined his head, amused. One by one the boy offered words tempered in observation, praising the Reach orchards that fed armies, the iron-born masts that shielded trade, the North's ironwood fit for ships and shields alike. He spoke of braiding strengths rather than pitting them, of alliances forged through craft as much as marriage. His voice did not crack once. When he finished, even the banners seemed to lean closer. Night shadowed the god's wood of Harrenhal, where twisted oaks struggled among the melted towers. Arya found Robard kneeling before a heart tree stump, eyes closed, lips moving. She waited, then asked what gods he prayed to, those with 7 faces, the nameless many, or the old ones in the leaves. All of them, he answered. I will need every eye watching. She offered needle. Then know each by blood. He cut his palm lightly, pressing skin to bark, letting red mingle with sap. The wood drank. Overhead, crows muttered, as though unsettled. Arya bound the wound and told him stories of her father's quiet honor and her mother's fierce vigil. Robard asked if he would one day wear a crown heavy as theirs. Arya stroked his hair and said the crown weighed nothing compared to the choice that won it. He nodded and stared at the stars trembling in the black water far below, seeing paths she could not. On the 5th morning the Golden Company struck. 50 Sellswords in antique armor slipped into the east gate, wearing badges of House Mutendot. They cut down sentries, flung open posterns, and let in thrice their number. Their war cry was a dragon's roar reborn. A black banner with red, 3-headed worm unfurled over the gatehouse. Lords panicked, some running for horses, others hiding behind their men-at-arms. Arya bolted toward the guesthouse where Robard slept. Steel clanged across the yard. Screams echoed against tortured stone. She leapt a corpse-littered stair, needle flickering. A sellsword lunged, only to realize too late he fought air. She slid past and severed his hamstring with a whisper. She crashed through the boy's door and found him awake, dagger ready, gray eyes calm. Time to flee, he asked. Time to hunt, she replied. Father and son found each other on the battlement. Gendry wielded 2-handed warhammer, crumpling breastplates like tin cups. Robard stayed at his shadow, darting in to hamstring wounded foes with short, vicious strokes. Sellsword sneered at a child's blade, until it found gaps in mail. Arya weaved through them as a ghost, whispers of valor Morghulis trailing her steel. Sansa's northern bows peppered the courtyard. Dornish spears formed a glimmering hedge. By dusk the company lay shattered against the castle's bone-white walls. Their paymaster, a gaunt man calling himself Meleys Targaryen, knelt bleeding before the assembled lords. He spat prophecy at their feet. The realm will burn again, for dragons hatch in men as well as eggs. His head rolled seconds later, courtesy of Lord Tarley's broadsword. Victory stitched unlikely cloth. Lords who doubted Storm's End Smith-Lord now praised his hammer. Those who mocked a boy's dagger now stared at the gore drawing on its edge. In the council room, beneath a scorched map of Westeros, Yara Greyjoy slapped a hand upon the table. The lad kept pace with warriors thrice his size. Let him keep pace with crowns as well. Others nodded, though some muttered the realm could not kneel to a child. Maester Corran stepped forward. Then guide him. A regency of the great houses until he comes of age. He unfurled a charter drafted while the battle raged, names blank, powers delineated. Gendry met Arya's gaze, and saw a road neither had chosen yet. Both had walked, since the day they met, on a gold-cloaked cart. He signed first, forging his oath as he did steel. Sansa signed next. Then Yara, then the Martell Prince, the Reach Lord, even Tyland, though he used green ink as if to hedge. Robard watched, fingers tracing the dagger's quartz inlay, aware more eyes lingered on him than the parchment. When the quills fell still, he spoke. Thrones are hammered like horseshoes. Too thin, and they snap. Too thick, and they drag the horse lame. I will be neither thin nor heavy. No one replied, but Arya glimpsed the relief that rippled through the hall. The realm was weary of kings forged in wildfire and screams. A boy who spoke like a smith might mend the breaks. She knelt, and others followed, until Harrenhal's cracked stones felt for one moment like hallowed ground. Robard's cheeks flushed. He reached for her hand. You will guide me, he murmured. Always, she said, but the path is yours to choose. He swallowed. I choose the realm. A fortnight later, ravens burst from every tower, wings blackening sunrise. They carried the conclave's decree, Robard Baratheon, Prince of Shipbreaker Bay and heir of Winterfell by blood of Stark, to be styled Lord Protector of the Realm, a council to rule in his name until his 16th name day. Some received the news with cheers, others with drawn daggers behind shutters. At Storm's End, Gendry lit the forge anew, sparks swirling like fireflies. In Winterfell, Sansa paced the godswood, remembering another child ruler lost to knives. At Pike, Yara hammered orders for longships to guard trade rather than raid. In Sunspear, the young prince composed verses praising a wolf of storms who would tame suns. Yet in the free cities, seekers hunted prophecies in red lamps and forgotten catacombs. The realm inhaled and held its breath like a man beneath a breaking wave. Robert spent the next year riding every glade and holdfast that would have him. He sat with fishermen in Driftmark, sampled smoked eel in White Harbor, knelt before the weirwood of Ashmark, and debated grain tariffs with Highgarden stewards. He listened more than he spoke, always returning with a small token, a twist of driftwood, a scrap of Maiden's Day ribbon, a child's copper ring. One twilight he surrendered all these trinkets to Gendry's forge. Father and son melted them down, poured them into a narrow mold. When it cooled, Robard lifted a circlet of hammered bronze, edges irregular, flecked with simple stones. No king's crown, yet heavy with 100 stories. He set it on the anvil, rather than his head. Arya watched from the doorway, mouth quirked. Planning to rule bareheaded? Not bare, he answered, just not above them. Her smile flickered, a proud echo of Ned Stark's quiet nod. In the second spring of his regency, a red comet scarred the night sky, trailing ember dust across the Dothraki Sea before any Westerosi eye witnessed it. When at last it blazed above the stepstones, sailors whispered, it was a sword for a promised prince. Robard walked the battlements of King's Landing, now his capital. He felt rather than saw Arya's presence behind him. Another omen, she said. Heavy thing, omens. He shrugged. If it is sword, I'd rather it stayed in the sky. Fewer throats to cut here. She snorted. Words like that will win you old maesters and smallfolk, but lose you sellswords. Robard leaned on the parapet. I'll keep the sellswords with honest coin. Honesty is rarer than comets. She studied him, finding in his profile a hint of Gendry's stubborn brow paired with the wolf's keen gaze. A lad born of steel and shadow, yet forging his own flames. The city tilted towards summer. Plague dogs prowled gutters, yet grain ships arrived on time. Fires broke out in the street of silk but were quenched before devouring half the ward, as in years past. Small miracles. In the Red Keep, Robard presided over petitions, listening to butchers and brewers, mummers and maesters. He rendered judgments quickly, sometimes harshly, but never without explanation. Men unused to reason found themselves unsettled by it. When a knight of House Kai refused to pay taxes levied on his orchard, claiming ancient exemptions, Robard publicly read the charter's faded ink and discovered the knight had miscopied the line 2 generations earlier. He imposed not a fine but a task. Kai's scribes would copy every ancient charter onto new vellum for the king's court. Thus pettiness became archive, and the realm gained memory instead of gold. Yet memory has claws. One parchment revealed that Harren the Black had once hoarded a cache of wildfire beneath the god's eye. Robard sealed that scroll but dreamed of green flames licking the lake's mirrored surface. He woke sweating, aware some secrets must burn unread. But others already sought the same fire. Word reached the Red Keep of miners spotted on the God's Eye shore, digging under sellsword banners. Gendry muttered about fools and powder kegs, Arya sharpened needle. The council urged sending gold cloaks. Robard chose to ride himself, 200 storm knights at his back. His mother kept pace, cloaks snapping like a wounded banner in morning gusts. They rode through summer storms, the road slick as sealskin. Robard spent rain-soaked nights studying maps by campfire glow, Arya tracing the route to a boatman she once bribed with Bravosi coin. She said little of why, he asked less. They reached the ruined towers just as dusk bled red across the lake. Smoke drifted from tunnel mouths rimed with pale dust. Sentries in mismatched armor barred their way, gold eyes stitched on black cloaks, second sons seeking first fortunes. Robard dismounted, unhelmed, palms open. I'm no dragon, he called, and neither are you. Leave the dragon's breath buried." Their captain laughed, mocking the boy's size. Robard drew his father's hammer. The sellsword leveled a crossbow. A wind hissed through shattered arches, and Arya was no longer at Robert's side. The captain's bolt loosed, but the arrowhead clanged off a swing of forged steel. Robard closed distance in 3 strides and shattered the crossbow like driftwood. Around him steel rang. Above, torches extinguished mid-flicker, as though an unseen current ripped their flames away. Sellsword screamed, struck by blades that appeared from darkness itself. Every man fell, but none saw who felled them. Afterward, Arya wiped needle clean beside the lake. Robard crouched near a fissure in the rock where faint green glow ebbed like a dying heart. "Enough to drown the realm in sorcery," he murmured. He ordered the tunnels collapsed, stone hauled from fallen towers to seal them. Then he rode on until dawn, silent save for hammer against saddle scabbard. In the pale blush of sunrise, he reined in on a rise overlooking farmers leading oxen across quiet fields. "Mother," he said, voice raw, "I am destined, they say, but destiny is just footprints in sand. Tides erase them. What stays is what we build." Arya regarded him, seeing at last a man where a boy had stood. "What will you build?" He turned south where the King's Road wound toward villages scoured by past wars. "A realm that does not need to be ruled by swords," he answered. "And I will start with a single road free of tolls." Years later, ballads would claim that on that rise the true reign began, though no crown gleamed, no trumpet sounded. Only a hammer rested across a saddle, and a wolfish woman watched her son sketch castles in air made golden by dawn. He would face krakens and vipers still, tempests of steel and whispers. He would learn the price of mercy and the toll of trust. But in that moment, the realm lay before him unbroken as fresh iron, waiting for hammer and will to shape it. Salt wind stirred his hair, distant gulls cried. Arya placed her hand upon his shoulder and felt the beat of a future not promised, but earned. Together they turned their horses toward the morning, and the realm, still mending, breathed a whisper of hope too fragile for words. Robard rode south along the King's Road under a sky the color of hammered tin, the dawn's burnished promise paling to the cool light of late summer. He traveled without heraldry, flanked by 24 storm knights in plain surcoats, and his mother gliding ahead like a gray shadow, scouting bends and bridgeheads with the same easy vigilance she once brought to Braavosi alleys. Each village they passed bore the scars of old wars, charred beams repurposed into chicken coops, foundation stones stacked into crude ramparts, children who paused their play to stare at passing horsemen with eyes too old for their small limbs. Robard dismounted wherever he saw such faces and spoke to millers and weavers, to hedge priests and hedge knights alike. He listened to tithes that crushed drought-struck fields, and to debts that choked families harder than hunger. He left behind promissory tokens, sealed with wax, bearing a crowned stag and stalking wolf entwined. A silver promise of road repairs here, a pledge to remit grain levies there. Coins drew cheers, but the wax drew something rarer, hope tempered with disbelief. On the 5th night, they reached Salt Pans. Once its quays had grown beneath Taroshi figs and Myrish lace, but now only herring sailed through upriver mists. The inn's common room smelled of peat smoke and boiled cider. Robard sat in a corner booth, map unrolled before him, marking hamlets where toll-gatherers extorted twice the crown's due. Arya returned near midnight, rain shimmering on her leather jerkin. She reported 2 men trailing them since Maidenpool, likely bounty cutters hired by some lord fearing more reforms. Robard sighed. "One rode free of tolls, and they think I'll burn their keeps." She shrugged. "They fear new coin clinks louder than old chains." He wiped ink from his fingers and rose. "Then we show them coin can also build." They left before first light, leaving the innkeep enough silver to repair 2 soot-scarred hearths and feed every orphan sheltering at the docks. The next moon turned harvest gold. Fields stood heavy with wheat that would rot uncut if war returned. Word reached them that Queen Sansa, still styling herself regent of the north, though her council pressed for a queenly crown, had sent wagons of northern rye south in tribute to Robard's nascent relief granary. At Storm's End, Gendry forged plowshares instead of swords, distributing them at cost to riverfolk. Maester Corin oversaw charter scribes, laboring day and night in the renovated library Robard, named for Davos Seaworth, its shelves already swelling. Small things, each a nail hammered into wastrel chaos. Yet across the narrow sea, the Selzored remnants of the Golden Company licked wounds in Tyrosh, swearing the black-bannered dragon would soar again. By the Festival of the Stranger, Robard's retinue reached King's Landing. The Red Keep's outer wall bristled with newly repaired crenellations. The masons who laid the first grey stones of Robard's free road project now swarmed its towers, strengthening bastions fissured by dragonfire decades past. Grand Maester Illifer greeted Robard in the throne room, Ross shadow light slanting through the high windows. "My prince," Illifer murmured, voice as thin as torn vellum. "Letters from Old Town. Your proposal to standardize tolls has woken every septon who ever counted a coin for a crossing." Robard rubbed his thumb against the hammer callus at his palm. "Good. Better debates and study than arrows over rivers." Illifer's brows knit. "They will test your quills before your swords." Robard smiled faintly. "Then I thank them for the cheaper test." That evening, the small council convened in the Tower of the Hand. Lord Tarley, his stiff mustache twitching like an angry hedgehog, presented alarming ledgers. Next year's royal revenue would plunge if Robard abolished 3 more provincial tolls. A lean, scholarly lord from the Fingers countered that new river trade would soon offset the loss. Sir Tyrant Lannister, flicking green-inked quill between fingers, proposed a compromise: reduction rather than abolition. Robard listened, weighing each word like ingots on a scale. When all arguments lay spent, he delivered judgment in a handful of plain syllables. "The roads will open. Find coin elsewhere or spend less." There was muttering, but even Tyland recognized the steel beneath the calm. Arya, silent near the hearth, watched Tyland's quill still at last. Only then did she exhale. News of the decree raced ahead of every raven, carried by merchants swift to test the promise. Carts laden with Dornish wine rolled north, without overflowing purses, emptied at every bridge. In return came barrels of northern smoked cod that once spoiled before reaching King's Landing, now bought eagerly by dockside taverns. Copper coffers at the Royal Mint rang with fresh trade coin, slimmer in tax, but multiplied in number. By winter's first frost, the loss Lord Tarley dreaded reversed by full third, silencing skeptics as surely as any blade. Yet success bred other hungers. Raider bands along the Green Fork began seizing wagons, aware their take now trebled in worth. Robard dispatched Sir Arlan Selmy with a company of mounted crossbowmen given leave to pursue renegades unto the Duskendale marches. Within a fortnight, raider heads, 12 in all, bound in salt-cured hemp, hung from the Maidenpool gates. The roads breathed easy again, but the realm tasted a sharpened edge beneath the balm. Winter's mouth opened wide 2 years into Robard's regency, spitting ice across the trident. Snow layered the god's eye in white silence whose beauty hid treachery. The lake had frozen solid for the first time since Aegon's wars, sealing the collapsed wildfire tunnels in a crystalline tomb. Robard led an inspection himself, his hammer slung across fur-lined shoulders, Arya gliding abreast like a dark streak on the snow. Their escorts hacked holes in the ice to sample water for green shimmer. None glowed, yet Robard felt the old dream's chill stir. "Secrets buried do not vanish," he told his mother. She tapped needle on her thigh. "Let the sleepers sleep, and if they wake," she smiled without mirth, "we bring sharper dreams." They returned to King's Landing to find the city transformed. Robard's free road had swelled trade so swiftly that the Street of Sisters overflowed with new stalls, tiered in 3 rows, one atop another like balconies. A temple to the Seven, half rebuilt since the wildfire devastation of Cersei's reign, at last showed marble domes unmarred by soot. But with growth came shouts. Guilds bickered over river wharfs. Gold cloaks squabbled with Tyrell caravan guards over new tariffs on imported Myrish glass. In the throne room, Robard mediated disputes until his voice cracked, yet each ruling knit the seams of a realm long torn by grand passions and lazy cruelties. Still, rumor coiled like smoke. Archmaester Darien wrote in cipher that a shadow queen in exile had crowned herself Aelys of Dragonstone, descendant of Daenerys through a bastard line, mustering banners in lists. Pressed by counselors to summon more men-at-arms, Robard instead ordered envoys. "Steel too eager dulls fastest," he said. Sir Tyland retorted that words could not breach Lyseni Sellsword contracts signed in blood. Robert studied Tyland's green blotter, remembered his mother's lesson that scribes kill slower but surer. He drafted letters promising immunity to any company that would abandon Aelys upon Westerosi shore, and swear fealty to the crown, for double the Lyseni pay. Scrolls sealed, ravens launched, small council glowered. Within 3 moons a ship named Nightingale docked at King's Landing, her hold stuffed with Braavosi crossbows and 200 Lyseni mercenaries wearing new stag and wolf brooches. Their captain delivered Elia strategic maps, her secret cipher key, and apologies for their former legality. Robard paid their coin from his personal smithy profits, and granted them Stormland's farmland. "Better sons of the anvil than ghosts on the sea," he told a flabbergasted council. Yet allies of Dragonstone did not fade like morning fog. Spared the mutiny, she slipped into Volantis, claiming sanctuary in the Red Temple. Volantine priests declared she carried the burning breath of the Mother of Dragons, and pillars of smoke rose nightly behind temple walls as she preached of a realm forged anew in fire. Robard read these accounts by lamplight, elbows aching from long council days, and wondered whether prophecy ever truly slept. Gendry, returned from Storm's End with arms full of new scrolls on Rivergate improvements, tossed the letters aside. "These words on imported parchment," he grunted. "We have walls of stone." Robard remembered burnt stone shining green at the god's eye and shook his head. "Stone melts. I'd rather melt hearts." Gendry laughed his booming forge laugh. "Then you'll need a furnace hotter than dragons." Spring returned hesitantly, timid crocuses braving streets once slick with winter slush. During the Feast of the Maiden, Robard decreed a contest of craft in the capital. Any guild, mason cooper or glassblower, could submit designs for a great bridge to span the Blackwater Rush north of the Mudgate, allowing the road network to flow unhindered when tides swelled. The winner would earn a royal charter and tax exemption for 20 years. Hundreds answered. Models crowded the throne room. Latticework trusses, floating pontoons, even a mad water dance contraption powered by tide mills. Robard walked among them with fascination, pausing longest over a modest plan proposed by a Myrish ex-slave woman newly sworn to the Builders Guild. Her design used reclaimed stone from the shattered dragon pit, bound by iron dowels forged in Storm's End. "Old fire tempered into new freedom," she said, voice trembling. Robard awarded her charter on the spot. When nobles murmured, he replied, "The realm was once built by conquest's fire. Let us rebuild by the fire of invention." While masons quarried stone for the bridge's footings, Robard organized a summit of riverlords at River Run to settle century-old water rights disputes. Arya joined him, needle sheathed in the small of her back, more comfortable with corridors than council chambers, but unwilling to leave her son amid fractious lords alone. At River Run, banners rippled across every parapet like bright fish scales. Mallister silver eagles. Blackwood trees? Frey towers. Though the Freys now styled themselves bannermen of Baratheon, after Robard pardoned the youngest line in exchange for fealty oaths over Walder's bones. The hall boomed with grievances. Robard listened until throats rasped. At last he proposed a radical bargain. Lords cede part of their river frontage for a crown-sponsored system of locks and weirs, guaranteeing navigability year-round in exchange for reduced taxes and guaranteed grain storage in royal granaries. Arguments erupted. Robard's hammer thudded the dais. "Water obeys no sigil. Yet you chain it with pettiness," he said. "Flow with it and grow." After 3 days of haggling, they signed. Maester Corran quipped. It was the first time Freys and Blackwoods agreed on ink color since the Age of Heroes. Summit concluded, Arya slipped through River Run's moonlit cloisters to visit the tomb of her mother, Catelyn. Robert followed at a distance, watching her kneel before cold stone, lips moving soundlessly. He felt a shiver of guilt. His destiny weighed heavy on memories belonging to the dead as much as the living. When Arya rose, her eyes glittered but her voice was steady. "You forge well," she said. "Steel, yes, but also strangers." He hesitated. "Do you fear I shaped them too fine, that they'll break?" She traced the dagger at his belt. The first Gendry gift, now worn like second skin. "Steel breaks when struck wrong." She touched his chest. "Strike right." Robard struck next at Old Wyke, the bleakest of the Iron Islands. Yara Greyjoy had finally tamed most of her reavers into merchants, yet Old Wyke's priests refused coin over salt. They still crowned their damp kings before a weeping stone face, muttering that the realm's new smith prince was weak for refusing blade and blood. When one such zealot raiding party seized a grain barge bound for Gulltown, Robard sailed with Yara aboard the sea bitch herself. Salt spray stung like nettles. Gulls wheeled over reefs guarding the island, as if the very birds were priests' spies. Robard found the heretic priest Baelor Blacktide preaching before a pyre of burned grain, an insult meant to starve the mainland. Robard stepped forward alone. "Your god drowned," he said softly. "Why feed him flame?" Blacktide scoffed. "Only salt's tears and sea's wrath-forged strength. You are but river silt." Robard unbuckled his hammer belt, letting it fall. Then, test silt. Blacktide drew a rusted salt dagger, expecting fear from a boy. Instead, Robard's offhand lashed like viper, seizing the priest's wrist, twisting until bone clicked. The dagger dropped. Robard pitched it into surf. "Salt will cut you sooner than me," he said. Blacktide spat curses. Robard let him rant, then offered a bargain. Rebuild burnt grain stores with ironborn timber shipments. Receive crown loans and a seat on his maritime council. Choose hunger and you'll bow anyway. Belly empty rather than full. Pragmatism triumphed. Blacktide bent knee before dawn. Yara grinned behind him, whispering to Arya. The lad just outsalted a priest. From Old Wyke, several captains volunteered to guard the King's Bridge works at King's Landing, pledging longships under stag and wolf pennants. Small folk along the coast cheered to see Ironman's sails escorting merchant cogs instead of chasing them. Robard knew alliances shifted like tide pools, but every ebb left another stone exposed for building. 4 winters had passed since Harrenhal's blood-soaked council. Robard's 16th name day approached, the date set long ago for his regency to end. At Storm's End, Gendry polished an iron diadem wrought from the bridge builder's circlet, adding stag antlers wrought in sleek arcs and a single garnet carved into a howling wolf's head. Arya watched him file edges smooth. "Hell hate wearing it," she said. Gendry snorted. "Let the crown pinch, keeps the head straight." He paused, suddenly uncertain. "Will he need us after?" She placed a hand over his blackened knuckles. "A king needs more than subjects. He'll need parents who tell him when he's wrong." Gendry grinned. "Good. I'm better at wrong than right." Ceremonies began on the first full moon of autumn. Lords and commons alike thronged King's Landing, markets choked with banners. The great septee, still incomplete, rang with hammers finishing gilded cornices so the 7 might glare properly upon the anointment. Beyond the walls, tent cities blossomed on every hill, each lord vying to outshine neighbors with harpists, dancing bears, fire-breathing fools. Robard viewed the spectacle from the ramparts and shook his head. "They forget the realm is broader than one hill." Arya smirked. "But you knew that at 7. Let them dance. Soon they'll march." The anointment itself took place at sunrise on the Dragon Pit's still-scarred terrace, chosen to remind all that dragons' ruins underlay their pageantry. Robard wore simple black leathers under a mantle of interwoven stag velvet and direwolf fur. Grand Maester Illifer anointed his brow with holy oils, while Sansa, solemn in white and gray, placed the garnet-eyed diadem upon his head. Robard knelt before her first, honoring the North's patience, and then rose to face the gathered realm. Trumpets brayed. Ravens burst skyward. He raised a gauntleted fist, not in triumph but in greeting. Then spoke only 9 words. "The realm is yours as much as it is mine." Silence pooled, then roared into applause that shook scaffoldings. Amid festivities, whispers reached Arya. Assassins had slipped into the city wearing acolyte robes, bearing vials of pale green liquid. She passed word to Robard during the feast's 3rd course, her voice low between verses of a Riverlands ballad. He excused himself, cloak swirling. Together they traced the killers to the half-rebuilt vaults beneath the sea at E. The assassins, 3 Lyseni devotees of the Shadow Queen, attempted to hurl their vials at supporting archways. Needle found one throat. Gendry's hammer, answering Arya's raven message, shattered another skull. Robard disarmed the 3rd by catching his wrist mid-throw, twisting until glass shattered harmlessly at their feet, liquid sizzling on stone. Guards dragged the assassin away. Robard stared at the smoking flecks. "Wildfire's cousin," he murmured. "Brewed for silent explosion." He ordered the vault sealed until alchemists could purge every hidden flask. Yet another cache, another dragon's breath, lurking in the bones of the city. The coronation feast continued above, oblivious, music drowning the hiss of deadly foam. The next morning, the new king convened council at dawn, eyelids gritty from no sleep. Tywin Lannister congratulated him, then slid forth a parchment heavy with gold leaf. A proposed loan from Casterly Rock to finance expansion of the royal fleet, interest compoundable each harvest. Robard asked 3 questions, 2 on ship numbers, 1 on crew pay, before refusing politely. The realm's fleet will be built by realm's coffers, not Lion's Mane. Tywin pursed lips, but bowed. Robard then presented his own draft. A crown-issued note redeemable in grain at set price, to underwrite docks and warehouses along the Green Fork. "Food is coin," he said. "Feed fleet builders, and we might not need half the fleet." Not all greeted new rule with ink. In the Dornish marchlands, a knight named Kyle Caron raised banners of the burning sword, claiming a dream vision of Aralor commanded him to slay the false king of Frost and Fort. He gathered followers, disaffected by river trade tariffs, setting torch to tax houses. Robard rode south with 2,000 men, Arya ahead as silent scout. They caught Caron's band at Blackhaven's old battlefield, where Robert Baratheon once shattered Rhaegar's hosts. Dawn painted frost shimmer across dead grass. Caron's zealots prayed aloud, brandishing blades heated in campfires to glow faintly red. Robard dismounted, hammer slung, and spoke across the field. "Your god loves flames, mine loves the anvil. You would burn what I build. Choose, lay down arms or be quenched in your own fire." Caron answered by charging. Battle erupted like flint to tinder. Storm Knights held center while Ironborn archers flanked. Arya, galloping with a wedge of outriders, sliced through Caron's rear guard. Robard met the zealot in single combat. Heated sword hissed at his steel, but when hammer met blade it flattened glowing edge, sparks dying against cold iron. Caron fell, disarmed, and Robard ordered him bound, not killed. "May your god judge you behind walls cold as mine," he said. Caron spent the remainder of his life in a solitary cell, lit by an iron brazier that never burned warm enough to glow. The victory cemented Robard's legend among small folk, a king who faced fire with steel and forbade pointless slaughter. Yet, nobly born war hawks grumbled he spared too many foes. Sir Adam Harlaw muttered at court, "Mercy is coin counterfeit. Pass it long enough, realm's purse empties." Arya confronted Harlaw in a gallery overlooking the courtyard. "Better empty purse than coffins," she said. Harlaw sniffed. "A wolf's mother shouldn't fear bones." She smiled without mirth. "I fear only fleas on carrion crows." The Ironborn knight paled. Rumor said Arya once exacted vengeance upon crow-cloaked men after her brother's fall. Word of the exchange spread. Challenges to Robard's leniency faded. For now. Winter withdrew once more, leaving thawed mud that clung to boots like unanswered appeals. Robard toured the newly finished Blackwater Bridge, its dragon pit stones gleaming sun-warm. The Myrish architect, now master mason of King's Landing, guided him across sweeps of arch, so perfect even Arya eyed them with grudging awe. Traders thronged the span, tossing coins into the river for luck as they crossed toll-free. In the middle stood a bronze plaque depicting a hammer crossed with a needle. Robard traced the etching. "Everyone will ask whose needle," he teased. Arya shrugged. "Let them wonder." She turned to watch barges sail unimpeded. "This is your forge, Rob," he corrected softly. "Robard." She corrected him in turn. "You are still a wolf. Do not forget." He smiled. "Never." That night, Arya walked the quiet corridors of the Red Keep and found herself before Bran's old solar, untouched since his passing. A weirwood-carved chair gathered dust near the window. She sat, feeling phantom eyes of the three-eyed raven upon her. Memories bled. Her younger self chasing cats, chanting Valor Morgulus under moonlit walls, counting names whispered to a sleeping god. She had been many faces, many deaths. Yet life, not death, had shaped destiny. A smith who forged more than steel. A son who chose roads over thrones. A crown hammered from the scraps of shattered empires. She rose, brushed dust from her knees, and walked back into torchlit hallways where the living still needed guiding shadows. Robard's reign entered its second year, crowned by harvests, so bountiful Old Town's archivists proclaimed it the most plentiful since Aegon Vay's reforms. Grain flowed north and south. Bakeries in Flea Bottom sold loaves for half last year's price. Yet across the sea, Alice of Dragonstone resurfaced in Qarth, parading 3 wyvern hatchlings dyed crimson and gold, claiming she would cross as soon as her beasts matured. Reports conflicted. Some said they were common sandworms painted and starved to mimic dragons. Others insisted scales glimmered with true summer fire. Robard dispatched maesters to verify but kept building. He commissioned a chain of lodges along the King's Road where travelers could rest under crown protection. He instituted standard measures of weight, stamping iron bricks with stag and wolf crest. He created a guild of scribes, tasked solely with copying ancient laws into plain tongue so even a farmer could read his rights. Inevitably, weight of rule pressed on him. Sleepless nights multiplied. Candle stubs littered his study like spent arrows. One dawn, Arya found him slumped over maps, ink pooling from an overturned bottle. She touched his shoulder. He startled. "I dreamed wildfire again," he confessed. The lake exploded beneath frozen ice, and bridges burned like matchsticks. She knelt, gripping his forearms. "Dreams warn. They don't dictate. What do you fear?" He exhaled. "That everything I build can still burn." She considered. "Then build where fire feeds life." She pointed to the overturned ink. "You spilled black, not green." He stared, then laughed hoarsely. Together, they cleaned the mess. By morning, he had drafted plans to store wildfire safely under heavily warded cells, regulated by a joint guild of alchemists and smiths, each vetoing the other. "Fire harnessed," he said, "not hoarded." Soon after, ravens arrived bearing dire news. Plague blossomed in Volantis, wiping out half the city's poorer districts, including the Red Temple. Reports placed Alice among the dead, consumed by fever. Many cheered. Robard mourned privately, not for a pretender, but for a wasted fire. He declared Qarthine ports closed until maesters could certify cargo free of contagion, a controversial edict that cost merchants dearly yet likely saved thousands. His decisiveness drew grudging respect even from Thailand. "A king who closes gates to coin," the Lannister mused, "is either mad or visionary." Gendry replied, "Or both. Hammer swings 2 ways." In Dalpondewani. 3 springs later, the Blackwater Bridge glittered with saffron banners as the First Crown's road caravan departed for the Reach, 300 wagons bearing grain, timber, and newly forged iron tools. Robard rode at the head, Arya trotting tight beside him, though she preferred shadows to parades. The road south wound through fields now vibrant with rotating crops, taught by scribes who turned free dinners at inns into agronomic lectures. At Bitterbridge, Lady Merryweather welcomed the caravan with a tourney of orange blossom lances, tilts fought in Robard's honor. He donned no armor, but presented the prize. A hammer-forged circlet of barley and oak leaves, signifying peace between plough and forest. The victor, a humble Blackhaven squire, dedicated his win to King Robard the Builder. Robard protested, "I am no Brandon Stark." The squire grinned shyly. "You might be both." Yet beyond the cheers, darker blooms sprouted. A clique of disaffected reachlords adopted the sigil of a bleeding rose, swearing vengeance for levies they claimed favored the Riverlands. They plotted in ivy-draped halls, pooling coin to hire assassins, until a faceless stranger wearing a wolf pin slipped through their conclave one soft summer night, and in the morning half, their number lay poisoned in a dry fountain, water-tinted pink. The survivors sued for pardon. Robard granted clemency, but stripped estates equal to the debts owed. Rumor tied the silent hand to Arya, but none dared voice it. The king's mercy, they learned, did not preclude unseen claws. When Robard returned to the capital, masons presented final accounts. The bridge had paid for itself within 4 years through increased trade tariffs, even after abolishing tolls. Surplus coin was enough to fund a new shipyard at Massey's Hook. Gendry proposed naming the flagship Dream of Winterfell. Robard countered Forge of Dawn. Arya suggested both. Twin ships, one to chase Winter's End, one to meet Dawn's forge. They hammered keels together that autumn, father and son side by side with shipwrights, Arya perched on stanchions guiding ropes like a silent hawk. As the 10th year of Robard's reign unfurled, a new generation never scarred by war grew tall enough to test swords dulled by peace. Training yards rang with sparring but not battle cries. Markets buzzed louder than mustering grounds. Grandmaster Elifer, white-bearded now, recorded in the annals. The realm breathed slow and steady, a smith's rhythm in place of the dragon's roar. Yet he added a cautionary note. Even peace must be tempered, lest softness creep into steel. Robard read the entry and smiled. He ordered new scholarships for war orphans of past conflicts, shaping them into engineers, healers, and road wardens. "If peace rusts steel will forge alloy," he quipped. One moonless night, Arya stood atop the repaired Tower of the Hand, eyes sweeping the city's lantern-lit veins. Robard joined her, leaning on the parapet. "You still patrol shadows," he said. "Old habits." She tugged her cloak tighter. "And you still chase dawn." He considered the black horizon. "Mother, do you ever regret the faces you wore?" She exhaled as if the wind stole words from her lips. "Faces kept me alive to meet your father. Meeting him forged you. Anything that leads to you, I regret nothing." He set a hand on hers. "Then I owe every death my life." She shook her head. "You owe life only to how you wield it." He squeezed her hand. "Then I'll wield it as you wield needle. Swift, sure, unseen when needed, shining when not." Below them bells tolled midnight. Somewhere, a baby cried. Perhaps in Flea Bottom, perhaps in a lord's cradle. The wind carried scents never before mingled. Dothraki spiced goat from a new quay eatery. Reach roses from carts trundling up the bridge. Forge smoke from Gendry's ever-lit smithy. Arya inhaled. "It smells like more than one kingdom." Robard nodded. "It smells like a realm." Lantern light caught his garnet diadem. The wolf-head jewel glinted as if winking at distant stars. And in the quiet that followed, neither heard drums of war nor thunder of dragons. Only the steady hiss of the forge that was a people's heart, beating sparks into night. Far to the north, beyond shadowed woods of the last river, a white direwolf howled at falling snowflakes that melted on its snout. Further south, fishermen hauled nets beneath the Blackwater Bridge, singing of kings who built roads instead of walls. And somewhere across the sea, an archivist in Lee's penned a treatise titled On the Worth of Quiet Kings, noting a curious fact: thrones of iron last longer when their rulers remember they are hammered from humble ore. He wondered whether any monarch could bear such humility for a lifetime. Then he dipped his quill and wrote of Robard Baratheon, born of stag and wolf, who crowned his people before he ever crowned himself. In King's Landing the forge fires never slept, nor did needles rest. Steel still broke, hearts still faltered, Dreams still burned. Yet there stood bridges to mend them, if one chose to cross. And in that choice lay the true realm, a sun born of storm and shadow, ruling not by prophecy's chain but by the quiet clang of a hammer shaping tomorrow, one measured, resolute strike at a time. The 16th harvest under Robard's opened road laws spilled golden as poured ale across Westeros, and the realm's heartbeat settled into the slow, confident rhythm of a smith's bellows. Yet the king's dreams darkened, as though night had begun dipping its quill into older, fouler inks. First came murmurs from the citadel, scraps of raven bone found near the wall, glyphs etched with a freezing fire no maester could name. Then, close on winter's breath, a fisher lass out of Hardhome arrived at Eastwatch, bearing a wooden box wrapped in sailcloth. Inside lay a shard of ice so cold it smoked in sunlight, impossibly slick, edges rippling like river water. When touched, it sang, a keening note, half sorrow, half command. Samwell Tarly, now Archmaester of Records, sent the shard south to King's Landing swaddled in oak ash and nettle leaves. Robard met Sam in the Red Keep solar, the maester's once plump face lined with frostbite scars from a journey that would have broken younger men. Sam warned of echoes of the dead whispering beyond the gorge. Not whites, he breathed, palms trembling around a steaming cup of lemon water, nor others. Something older, deeper. Ice that remembers. Down train. Robard listened as the storm lanterns flickered, Arya leaning against the wall, silent as the gap between ticks of a clock. If the ice remembers, the king said at last, what does it see? Sam swallowed. A flame bright enough to melt it. Robard frowned. Dragons, perhaps. Or a king who builds roads. 2 days later, ravens winged north carrying royal writs. Refortify the night fort. Survey every abandoned wildling village. Dispatch ravens south at the first ghostlight sighting. In Winterfell, Queen Sansa, titled at last after northern lords insisted, conscripted carpenters to reinforce the king's road with new wayhouses, stocked with peat bricks and wool blankets. In White Harbor, Lord Manderley funded double fishing fleets to keep grain coffers full, should ice choke the neck. Across marshlands, reedsmen dredged forgotten canals, so food could still move when snow swallowed the causeways. But danger rarely arrived from one horizon. While the kingdom braced for cold, heat smoldered across the narrow sea. Though the plague in Volantis had consumed Alice of Dragonstone, it had also scattered relics of her cause. One such relic, a gaunt priest named Sethiero Drogosh, once her confessor, fled to Tyrosh with a surviving wyvern, larger now, leathery wings the color of rusted copper. Drogosh renamed the creature Ember and preached it the reincarnation of Meraxes. Sethiero's sermons reached ears eager for spectacle. Deposed Pentoshi princes, spice guild magnates, tired of losing tariffs to Westeros toll-free roads, and sellsword captains nursing grudges. Coins pooled, and soon the priest sailed west with a fleet flying banners of a bleeding sun. The first Hiroshi ships appeared off Stepstone's reefs, scouting flight paths safe for a beast, unaccustomed to salt air. Word passed from smugglers to the Iron Fleet scouts, and within a fortnight a carved narwhal's tusk, Kara Greyjoy's urgent token, lay on Robard's council table. Gendry jabbed a thumb toward the tusk. Wyvern or dragon, copperhide or crimson scale, it still breathes fire. Stone walls won't hold against a flying furnace. Tyland Lannister countered that the creature was no true dragon. It had neither Valyrian instincts nor intellect to target strategic aims. A fancy war banner no more. Arya drummed Needle's pommel on her belt. A torch waved in a hay barn is still only a stick until the straw catches. Then you have wildfire. Robard rose. We meet fire with rivers. Confused faces turned to him. He spread a new parchment. The final survey of central canal routes linking the Trident to the Wendwater. These channels can flood 10 leagues of low farmland. If Ember strikes, he tapped the boundaries, we release locks, drench the land, and rob flame of fuel. Lord Tarly objected. Crops would drown. The king nodded. Yes, better sodden grain than charred bones. A vote called, Council split 5-4, but Robard's casting vote carried. Work crews left within an hour. Construction meant levies. Levies meant taxes, and taxes chafed lords accustomed to surplus. The Bleeding Rose faction, thought wilted, bloomed again under a new leader. Lady Sabitha Rowan, famed for fields thick as carpets and temper sharper than turnip knives. She refused canal labor drafts, claiming reach grain was realm's lifeblood. "We shall not bleed for northern fairy tales," she announced at Golden Grove. Her pledge triggered a dozen minor bannermen to likewise withhold men. Meanwhile, Sathera's fleet anchored at Tarth, wheedling safe harbor with gifts of Taroshi dyes. Ember remained caged on the largest cog, fed goats spiced with chilies to stoke hotter breath. Robard faced rebellion and invasion in one breath. Yet as storms often fuel one another until lightning cleaves clouds, he saw chance in crisis. Summoning envoys from Old Town and Marine, yes, Marine, where dragon lore lingered in dusty halls once touched by Daenerys, he proposed a conclave at Highgarden itself. There, grain and flame would duel, not with swords but with knowledge. Lord Tarly balked. Why treat with priests who worship fire? But Arya observed that a wolf who refuses to sniff the wind still smells the ash. Thus in the flush of early spring, King Robard led a caravan of scroll carts, water engine models, pyromancers under Ironborn guard, and a raven coat of translators toward Highgarden's whispering gardens. He traveled light otherwise, only his river hammer, Arya, and a retinue of scribes. Sansa joined en route with northern engineers. So did Lord Manderley, bearing barrels of ice salt, a crystalline powder rumored to damp small fires. Even Gendry remained in the capital, trusting his son's judgment, forging iron sluice gates by the hundred. Highgarden had not hosted a true council since Mace Tyrell's ill-planned royal wedding. Gah! Roses tangled thick along its spiral towers now, petals drifting like soft rain. Lady Sabitha received them in the dappled shade hall, her gown a tapestry of harvest icons. She studied Robard's delegation as though weighing hogs. "You've come to coax grain from my coffers," she mused, brandishing books instead of lances. Robard bowed slightly. "To barter knowledge for life, my lady." Sabitha arched a brow. "Life drinks water too, I hear. I'll not drown my fields so northern ice ghosts can sleep easier." Robard motioned. Samwell stepped forward, presenting the shard in a lead-lined box. It smoked even in Highgarden's mild bloom, the table frost-rimmed in seconds. Gasps rippled. Robard pressed a handkerchief to the ice. When he lifted it, the silk had hardened, fibers crystalline. He dropped it. The square shattered like glass. Sabitha's bravado dimmed. The king then unrolled parchment diagrams showing canal gates triggered by weighted chains, flood plains turning farmland to temporary moats. 7 days submersion, he explained, then sluice release, silt enriches. Manderley upended a ladle of ice salt over a torch. Blue sparks crackled, smothering flame. Our salt mines can supply barrels enough to dust canal edges, creating fire breaks once water recedes. Sam spoke of ice memory, of histories etched below zero. "The wall fell once. We dare not trust it stands forever. This shard is a whisper of that collapse." Sabitha listened, tension coiling like a drawn bow. And then she surprised them all. She reached into her bodice and produced a letter bearing red wax. "Sathera's seal. The priest offers double Riverlands tariffs if I keep my men. He sails for Blackwater Bay within the moon." Robard felt council ears prick, betrayal laid bare. Sabitha's green eyes glittered. But he underestimates the price of roses. She handed the letter to Robard. "Convince me your water wins. If so, my bannermen dig." For 3 nights debates roiled the shade hall. Pyromancers argued burn radius. Reach farmers argued root rot. Northern ice smiths demonstrated ways to freeze surplus grain for later. Arya circled the periphery, noting faces, alliances, fears. On the 4th dawn, she found Sabitha alone in the kitchen garden, clipping dead heads. "You fear famine more than fire," Arya said. Sabitha laughed softly. "Fire is spectacle. Famine is the slow assassin." Arya knelt, turning soil between fingers. then sow seeds that drink both water and ash. She revealed a pouch of winter barley crossbred at Winterfell. Flood-resistant, early ripening. Sabitha weighed a kernel on her tongue. Tastes of dusk. And of next spring, Arya replied. When council reconvened, Sabitha pledged 8,000 diggers, but demanded crop trials, canal dredge rights for river silt fertilizer, and a promise. Should fields fail, the crown would subsidize bread for every mouth in the reach. Robard accepted, sealing with his river hammer on the shade hall anvil. The sound rang through rose corridors like clear bells. News traveled swift. Other hesitant lords, seeing Sabitha's capitulation, signed on. Canal chains rattled in every hamlet along the Trident. Levees swelled. Carpenters shaped lock gates from Gendry's iron. Ships from Bravos hauled ice salt north. Ember's wings beat across the stepstone skies, yet each day Robard's bulwarks rose higher. Scythiero's fleet reached Blackwater mouth under a blood-smudged sunset, setting anchor just beyond Scorpion Range. The Wyvern roared from its deck cage, a metallic shriek rolling up the river. Flea-bottoms shivered. Children swore they felt heat on their faces, though the beast slept a league away. Robard climbed the rebuilt Tower of Maegor and studied the speckled sails. Fire playing at dragon, he murmured. He dispatched envoys offering safe passage if the fleet turned south to Dorne for peaceful trade. Scythiero nailed the scroll to his mast, set it ablaze, and released Ember. Flame licked the dusk as the beast soared, wings bruised red in dying light. Dockworkers scattered, ballista crews cranked. Arya's long-trained archers loosed barbed shafts dipped in ice-salt slurry. Two struck, one near the shoulder joint, one along the tail ridge, searing vapors hissing on contact. Ember shrieked but banked toward the city. Robard watched, jaw taut, then gave the command. Flood stage 1. Chains clanked. Upriver, lock gates toothed open. Black-brown water, fat with spring melt, surged into side channels. Within minutes, low-lying warehouses lay waist-deep, and streets nearest the river turned swirling mazes. Ember's fire breath met rising mist, sputtered. Flames licked but found little that would catch. One gout singed half a tower roof before rain cannons, modified grain sprayers, loosed sheets of water, dousing sparks. The Wyvern circled, disoriented. From the ramparts, Arya released a flight of falcon kites. Frames wrapped in reflective Myrish glass, tails soaked in incense to irritate the beast's nostrils. Sun shards, mirrored by early moonlight, flashed across Ember's eyes. Its next breath veered wide, igniting only river vapor. Then a scorpion bolt from the Blackwater Bridge, modified to fling ice-salt barrels, exploded against Ember's breast. Steam howled, copper scales blistered. The beast faltered, wings stuttering like broken bellows. Scythiero, aboard a skiff launched upriver, bellowed foreign curses, trying to lure his mount back with a horn's three-note call. Too late. Ember spiraled into the floodplain just north of the mudgate, hissing as water cloaked its fire. Soldiers waded thigh-deep to net crippled wings. Robard strode onto the makeshift island where the creature thrashed. He knelt in muddy water, staring into Ember's furnace eyes as they dulled. Pity, not triumph, shadowed his face. It knew only chain and flame, he murmured. He ordered the beast bound alive, hauled to the dragon pit's skeleton, where healers might learn, not to tame, but to understand. Scythiero's skiff never reached shore. Yara's arrow found the priest's throat mid-river. The Tyroshi fleet, leaderless, surrendered by dawn. King's Landing awoke to sodden markets, but few casualties. Children splashed through puddles, chasing floating fruit. Fishermen speared carp, flung upriver by the surge. Robard delivered edicts of compensation and rebuilding at noon. Gendry supervised, drying ovens forged to salvage damp grain. By week's end, canal locks drained. Silt-rich fields waited planting. Lady Sabitha arrived with winter barley seed and reached Robard atop the bridge that had once smothered assassination beneath its stones. "Your water wins," she conceded, offering a single rosebud stripped of thorns. Robard tucked it behind a leather wrist guard. "Your grain will too." While the capital dried, Sam's new order of ice readers examined the shards returned from Hardhome, discovering they responded to heat by forming runes in frost. Interpreters pieced a warning. Stone and water bind night. Stir one, break both. Sam presented the finding to Robard, fearing the floodworks might anger deeper frost. Robard weighed the omen against living memory. Stone is always stirring, he replied. We choose whether to bind it or bleed on it. Sam departed reassured, if puzzled. Peace, however, carries its own entropy. 10 years of roads and canals, of corked wildfire, of bridled flame and water, had knit Westeros, but also spawned mutterings of stagnation. Young knights longed for deeds worthy of bards. Merchants chafed under fair price decrees that capped profits. Even Gendry smiths sighed for commissions grander than sluice gates. Robard sensed restlessness like metal fatigue in a well-worn blade. So he announced the great foundry project, a ring of industrial smithies outside Lannisport, each guild contributed by a different region. Reach charcoal masters, northern iron miners, Dornish sandcasters, to pioneer alloys, unknown. Profits would fund scholarships, apprenticeships, and experimental siege defense designs. Lannister lords perked at new gold. Builders sharpened chisels. Restlessness shifted to purpose. To inaugurate construction, Robard embarked on a Western progress, visiting every sponsoring house. Arya, now showing silver in her hair, rode again as unseen advance guard. On the march, rumors flared, a haunting in the Green Fork marshes, lights dancing above water at midnight. Intrigued, Robard diverted with a handful of scouts. They reached a half-sunken watchtower ringed by reeds white as bone. That night, ghost lights indeed flickered, pale blue flames drifting above the water. But as the king approached, they coalesced into a single orb that imploded, leaving ash-cold silence. In its wake, the shard of remembered ice, kept always in Robard's saddlebag, hummed. Sam's research suggested the lights marked thin spots where memories of the long night pressed against present time. Robard ordered stone cairns and signal beacons erected around the marsh to monitor future flare-ups, and recorded the phenomenon for the Citadel. Further west in Fair Isle, a lantern-eyed entrepreneur named Corin Prester proposed marrying forge heat with sea wind to power bellows and smelters, an invention he claimed would cut charcoal need by half. Robard tested the prototype, a tower of copper fins that spun shrieking in ocean gusts, driving pistons. Gendry, summoned, declared it loud as a dying kraken but clever. The king funded 12 towers, stipulating each be shared by at least 2 rival guilds, forcing cooperation. Competition fires minds, he told Corin, but shared sparks light bigger forges. During these months, ember healed slowly in the dragon pit. Maesters discovered its breath no longer flamed. Ice salt residue had fused air sacs. Yet scales regrew iridescent, and the creature displayed startling calm around the pit urchins who fed it. Arya visited at dusk, watching the wyvern stretch crippled wings and warble low notes. She thought of Nymeria then, the direwolf still roaming far woods. Both beasts' history bent but not broken. She began training Ember's keepers in silent signals, teaching patient respect over whip cracks. One twilight Robard joined her, leaning on the broken marble balustrade. A tyrant's torch is becoming a child's legend, he mused as a small girl giggled, tossing a goat-hide ball. Ember nudged it back gently. Arya's smile curved. Every blade you melt can cast a new shape, she said. Robard watched the wyvern's eyes, pools now, of quiet copper. Even ice remembers, he whispered, recalling Sam's phrase. Perhaps fire can forget. The foundry project bloomed within 2 years. Smokestacks rose along the coast, but their plumes burned cleaner, Prester's wind towers powering precise heats. Alloys of iron, nickel, and tiny amounts of leftover wyvern scale produced weatherproof chain links. Kings rode lantern posts, switched from tallow to gas, distilled from Dornish tar, piped through ironworks. Apprentices from smallfolk families earned silver learning, valve craft. Scribes printed manuals in plain speech, spreading new literacy. Robard toured sites incognito with Arya. She in faded hood, he in laborers' tunics, speaking with furnace-stokers, listening to their curses and triumphs. At night, beside campfires he sketched improvements, sliding blast doors, water-jacketed chimneys. Gendry teased his son for drawing more than ruling, but pride clenched his throat when master smiths adopted the royal scribbles. Yet memory's ice continued humming, soft now but insistent. New shards surfaced along the shivering sea. Hard-home survivors told of a frozen statue that wept. Maesters feared a slow awakening. Sam petitioned for permission to melt the fragments in dragonfire. Robard refused. "We study before we slay," he said. Instead he funded a research outpost at the Night Fort, staffed by northern wizards, iron-born salt mages, and Volantine Red Priest, fire meeting ice in fragile truce. Sansa oversaw walls strengthened with riverhammer alloy. Bran's old ravens, still living, nested in its rafters as though pleased. During a rare lull, Robard revisited Storm's End, seeking quiet with Gendry on the windy forge balcony. Father and son shaped a ceremonial plowhead of the new alloy, edges engraved with roses, reeds, wolves, stags. Gendry asked, hammer ringing, "When storms return, will roads hold?" Robard turned molten metal in tongs. "A road is a promise, not stone. Promises hold when people walk them." Gendry nodded, accepting the answer only a smith's heart would savor. But storms did return, in ways none foresaw. In the Vale, a charismatic child claimant, Arya's alleged descendant, rallied hill tribes and disaffected knights disgruntled by low-born mill taxes funding faraway foundries. They seized the Eyrie while Lady Royce hosted an envoy. Feather-clad rebels flung servants from sky cells and declared, "Sky for the sky-born, stone for stone-born." The message clear: noble or not, King's Landing meddled too far. Robard faced hardest choice yet: storm the impregnable castle or sue for negotiated climb up sheer walls. Assault risked thousands dead in a cause some lords muttered he invited by change fatigue. Yet surrendering the Vale's granary and moon metals would cripple the foundry project. He summoned the Storm Talons, elite climbers trained quietly by Arya from ex-faceless novices and Braavosi roofrunners. Their commander, a one-eyed woman called Arya Thinblade, proposed a raid through secret snow tunnels, used once by Lysa Arryn's maids. "Open the postern from inside," she said. "Avoid blood." Robard consented on 2 conditions: no child slain, and if the rebels surrendered, they'd face trial, not summary acts. The night assault unfolded under new moon. Talons slipped up ice chimneys, melted sky cells bars with pocket forges, gagged lookouts. By dawn the rebels' child king perched on the moon door, surrounded. He sobbed that the sky had promised him wings. Arya coaxed him down, offering a wyvern feather. The gates opened. Royal guards marched in. Trials followed, swift but fair. Most ringleaders condemned to serve 5 years building mountain aqueducts, their labor feeding Vale farms. The child claimant, merely a pawn, was fostered to a lighthouse keeper on Cape Wrath, where Horizon taught humility. King Robard journeyed to the Eyrie afterward, standing on its dizzying heights. The sky felt thin, dangerous, intoxicating. He ordered construction of east-faced terraces to grow alpine herbs, and a slender observation spire for astronomers. "Let the sky feed minds," he declared, "not swallow them." Some old lords called him mad, but younger knights enrolled in terrace-cutting crews, drawn by challenge and pay. Thus rebellion birthed knowledge. Years unfurled into a tapestry none could have painted when a girl of wolf blood and a smith bastard met beneath a smoking cart. Roads laced the land like silver veins, canals sparkled, foundries glowed nights crimson. Ice outposts hummed, embered wyverns sang to children. Riverside amphitheaters echoed with plays about a king who forged water into walls. And amid it all, Arya watched, older now, hair iron-gray whipping in wind atop parapets she once skulked beneath. She walked the city incognito still, but slower, savoring stall spices, street ballads, the mundane miracle of vendors arguing copper prices instead of funeral costs. One dawn, she found Robard alone in the godswood transplanted to the Red Keep courtyard, kneeling before its heart-tree sapling. Snow dusted its red leaves, though midsummer approached. Ice memory blooming. He traced the face carved by Bran years ago. "Must every age face night?" he whispered. Arya crouched beside him. "So we remember dawn." He looked at her, eyes the gray of storm-washed stones. "I will not see every dawn." She smiled softly. "Nor I, but the road flows past us." He slipped a scroll into her hand. His draft decree establishing the order of walkers, citizen wardens to maintain roads, canals, sky terraces, foundries, sworn to realm, not crown. "When kings forget, walkers remind," he said. Arya pressed the parchment to her breast. "Needle cuts knots. This will cut tyranny." The decree passed despite lordly grumbles. Small folk hailed it. Each region elected walkers yearly, chosen by craft halls and village councils. Soon brown-cloaked figures strode highways clearing debris, mediating toll disputes, mapping new border paths. They carried staffs capped with tiny twin sigils, hammer and needle. Children ran to greet them, calling them road wolves. Arya served as first High Walker, though few recognized her under cowl. She spent seasons crossing the land that had once been battlefield, now mosaic of plow furrows and bell towers. At inns she heard tales of remembered ice, sighted less each year, as though the land itself soothed old wounds. In the Dornish marches she stood atop a canal levee where waters sluiced between floodgates she'd once defended from zealous flames, and watched barley sway on fields Sabitha Rowan's granddaughter now tended. During a midsummer mood at River Run, Robard announced construction of the Library of Rivers, a floating archive moored on barges that could travel to any town, bringing books where no road yet reached. Sam wept openly. Scribes drafted waterproof codices etched on treated turkey quills. Manderley funded barge kitchens. In White Harbor, fishermen hoisted sails painted with wolf staggery. In Sunspear, sand dolphin teams offered leather scrolls of waterspell songs to the library. Late one evening, Arya sat on the library's prow beside Ember, now Emberissa, once beast of war turned gentle barge tug. The wyvern's tether line glowed faint under lanterns. Robard joined her, handing wine cups. They watched stars ripple in river water. "When we began," he mused, "who imagined a monster pulling books?" Arya chuckled. "Monsters are stories. Stories change." She sipped. "And so do monsters." Robard's gaze drifted north. "Ice still whispers." Arya nodded. "But softer. Like an old song fading." She squeezed his hand. "And if it returns?" He smiled, weathered. "Sure. Then we build louder songs." In the hush that followed, frogs croaked cadence, and river reeds rustled like pages turned by an unseen reader. The realm stretched from frosted wall to scorched sands, tied not by sword point but by bridges, canals, terraces, and the quiet certainty that every night ended. Roads shone under moonlight, each cobble a word in an endless pledge, that a son of smith and wolf once chose to rule by building rather than breaking, and a woman forged in shadows walked beside him, needle poised, carving passage through dusk toward mornings no prophecy could predict. So the road wound on, carrying wagons, dreams, and children who would one day ask about the chipped hammer and slender blade crossed on every milestone. And mothers would tell them, as carts rumbled by, that long ago a king listened to the land, and a faceless girl made sure he never forgot the faces within it. The 25th harvest since the roads were free dawned beneath a sky, the color of newly quenched steel. From the widow walk atop the rebuilt dragon pit, Robard watched the city stretch. Smoke rising from forges beside bakeries, gulls threading the fumes. Somewhere below, the wyvern Emberissa warbled to the harbor cranes, a basso purr that rattled tiled roofs. The king's hands rested on a rail polished smooth by nights of similar vigils, knuckles marked with old hammer burn. Wind teased copper strands at his temples. He was 40 now, yet the streaks of premature silver lent him an air of oak bark dusted with frost. He heard her before he felt the presence, the whisper of soft-soled riding boots, the faint metallic clink of a needle-thin blade shifting beneath a gray cloak. Arya took her place beside him, hair gone moon-bright yet eyes as sharp as the night they fled Harrenhal. She looked north, toward a haze too distant for city folk to mark. "The walkers at Northwatch scent crow," she said. Lights again. Blue columns this time, stabbing from the snow like spears. Robard closed his eyes. The shards had been stirring more often. Threads of frost song in Samwell's scrying bowls. Reports of hoarfrost paintings that melted into runes beneath morning sun. Did they lose anyone? A guard's fingers, frozen black inside his gauntlets. He swore the cold poured through the steel. She met his gaze. "They will need warmer iron." He exhaled. "Then we gift them the new nickel blend. Gendry's crafters finish the molds." She smiled. "He curses it dulls chisels faster. So hell forge better chisels." They allowed silence to stretch, a scar of shared memories. Below, Emberissa unfurled a wing and caught a gust, dragging torches in her wake. Children on the pier squealed delight. Fishermen muttered about scaring mackerel. Letters awaited the king when he reached the council chamber. One bore the green seal of Archmaester Samwell, shipped upriver by fast boat rather than raven. "Urgent," the courier whispered, eyes wide. Robard sliced the wax. Inside, Sam's script jittered. The ice remembers too clearly now. Shard songs converge beneath God's eye. Send ink, iron, and wisdom, or send fire. There followed coordinates, lunar calculations, and a sketch of concentric circles resembling ripples from a stone cast deep. At its center, Sam had drawn a tiny symbol, a crown with a crack through it. Robard's finger traced the crack. Tywin Lannister, leaning over his shoulder, murmured, "Dramatic for an archivist." Across the table, Lord Menderley huffed, "Maesters fear their shadows. We've had omens for decades, omens that froze steel." Arya reminded him, stepping from behind a curtain. Tywin frowned at her sudden appearance but said nothing. Robard rolled the parchment. "Samwell has never cried wolf without reason. We investigate." Naim. He dispatched riders to the Night Fort, and Greenguard instructing Ice Reader detachments to rendezvous at Harrenhal, then summoned Gendry from the Lannisport foundries, with orders to bring heliostat mirrors, an absurd experiment to Lannister minds, glass-smooth copper discs pivoted by rope and wind to focus sunlight. Tywin scoffed until Arya asked if lions feared their own reflections. He turned crimson and signed the requisition. 3 days later, Robard stood on the foredeck of the barge archive, River Reeve, moored below the Red Keep's south wall. Bibliarchs bustled, securing codices in waxed chests. Behind them, Emberissa crouched in a specially braced cradle, wings frost-scarred yet serviceable. Her handlers soothed her with reed flutes. Occasionally she snapped at pigeons daring too near. Robard secured travel papers for 50 walkers, 20 ice readers and 30 smiths, as well as stores of ice salt, mirror shards the size of tombstones, and barrels of resinous pitch. Before dawn on the 4th day, they pushed upriver, oars dipping without splash. Rain silvered the water, drumming library roofs with soft insistence. Arya paced the starboard rail, hood shadowing lines time had etched on her cheeks. She paused when Robard approached. "Storm's brewing," she said, nodding to clouds shaped like mailed fists. He shook his head. "The storm is under the lake, waiting." She gripped the rail. "Then let's cut its heart." Harrenhal's towers clawed the sky as they had the first day of Robard's fate, but restoration crews now scaffolded melted walls, turning black glass flows into barracks and granaries. Flags of the walkers, crossed hammer and needle, fluttered over the gate. Inside the great hall, Samwell waited, parchment sick and travel-stained. Beside him, a young woman in black maester robes held a crystal cylinder filled with pale, slowly swirling snow. Robard clasped Sam's hands. The maester's eyes shone with dread and joy at once. "This is Aelinor," Sam said, gesturing. "Our foremost Aethresian. Studies sound beyond hearing." Aelinor bowed. "Majesty, the shard song amplifies. Here." She placed the crystal between them. It vibrated. Faint music, no, more like sighing wind, filled the hall. It rose, then fell, resolving into a heartbeat's echo. "It mimics any soul nearby," she whispered. "But when shards across the realm hum at once, the beats align, Forming. Intention. Robard felt hairs lift on his forearms. Arya circled the cylinder, eyes narrowing as if studying an adversary's stance. Intention for what? Aelinor swallowed. To unmake the quiet. Sam pointed to parchment maps layered with new circles. Every shard thrums along paths that converge here. He tapped the god's eye. The lake remembers being fire in the Age of Heroes, when a star fell. The shards may seek that cradle. Robard recalled his childhood dream of green flames licking the frozen surface. If they breach? Sam's lips thinned. Ice tied south. Frost undone by your floodworks, perhaps, but at a cost beyond grain. Thailand, arriving late, scoffed again, but quieter. Strategy councils devoured the next days. Gendry arrived, bearing 3 wagons of mirror discs wrapped in wool. He looked older, beard streaked white, but his arms still bulged like wrought bars. He clapped Robard's shoulder. You ask a smith to lasso sunlight? Fine. I'll shoe a comet if needed. They tested a prototype outside the gate. 6 men angled the panel so dawnlight flashed across the courtyard, igniting pitch flecks in a trough. Arya grunted approval. Yet politics slithered into war rooms. A clutch of southern lords, led by Sabitha Rowan's ambitious nephew, Lord Quentin, objected to sending levy bowmen north. We forfeited grain to floods last time, he said in meeting, and got wyvern dung on silk carpets. The Blackwood envoy countered that ice cared surely little for carpets. Voices rose until Robard slammed hammer on a bench, splintering oak. This realm forged your coffers. You will guard its heart or live bankrupt in a wasteland, he said. Quentin paled but assented. Later, Arya found the Rowan scribe secretly drafting a pledge to withdraw after the first skirmish. She left a single rose thorn embedded in his desk blotter. No further notes appeared. On the eve of departure, Arya climbed Harrenhal's highest, surviving tower. She carried no torch, moonlight sufficed. She stood where molten stone still rippled, remembering the screams under dragonfire she had once heard as a child scavenger. Robard joined her, breath frosting. You should rest, he said. She shook her head. Dreams wait to ambush sleep. He understood. Nights of her youth haunted by faceless kills, his by green fire. He offered a wineskin. She drank. Will we win? He considered distant constellations, once used by Valyrian chartmasters to navigate nothingness. Victory measures different, he said. If the roads still carry carts after, that's enough. She smiled. Small and fierce. Then let's pave tomorrow. The host marched at sunrise. Walkers in brown, ice readers with crystal rods, smith battalions hauling mirrors, reach levies, northerners clad in wolf fur, ironborn archers. Emberissa flew overwatch, children chasing her shadow across fields until villages disappeared into dawn mist. Riverland's farmers looked up from barley shocks, murmuring blessings. They crossed the Tumblestone, then angled east toward the King's Road, but near Hague's Mire Sam guided them off into trackless wetlands, following shard resonance. Night camps crackled with forge fires heating spade tips. Every mile, Gendry's crews sank wooden pilings to brace mirror frames. 4 nights in, scouts sighted blue columns, shafts piercing clouds, silent as prayers. The lights pulsed on, off, in a rhythm matching Aelinor's cylinder now strapped to her back. She hummed under her breath, sensing, brow beaded with sweat. They're calling, she whispered. At Naxon's ford, they encountered first resistance. Figures emerged from reeds, ice pale, skin webbed with frost veins, eyes blank. Not whites. They bled when cut, but their blood filmed crystalline before pooling. They moved with jerking precision, as though puppeted by distant will. Walkers formed defensive square. Robard at its center swung hammer slow and deliberate, shattering limbs that crackled like breaking branches. Arya flowed along the perimeter, needle whispering between bone seams. When the last creature fell, it melted to slush. Gendry spat. Ice in place of marrow. Aelinor knelt, scooping residue into beaker. It hissed, etched frost fractals across the glass. The encounter steeled the levies, Fear hardened into resolve. They pressed on, reaching the god's eye by dusk of the seventh day. The lake stretched placid as black glass, reflecting a sky, bruised purple. But along its southern arc, towers of ice protruded, 10, 20 more, growing from the water like birthstones. They hummed, audible even above creak of wagons. Sam's cylinder spun madly. "The memory is building form," he cried. Mirror crews raced to assemble. Gendry directed from trestle vantage. Panels slid into sockets, ropes tightened, counterweights anchored to submerged posts. Each mirror caught last light, hurling it across the lake to converge upon a central point where no tower yet rose. Steam hissed, but the lake fought back. Rings of frost rippled outward. Water between mirrors flash froze, trapping barges. Ice readers jammed rods into forming sheets, channeling shards' own hum to fracture them. Cracks spidered but rehealed. Emberissa strafed overhead, exhaling low-temperature steam. Her crippled sacks no longer birthed fire but released superheated vapor Gendry had learned to coax with mineral packs. The vapor carved trenches through newborn ice, buying time. Levees pounded wedge stakes, hauling barges free. Above all the tumult, pillars of blue surged higher, converging until they formed a dome of ghostly flame 20 stories tall, just above the lake's heart. Inside that luminescence, something stirred. A silhouette immense, humanoid but lacking definition, its limbs trailing mist like torn banners. A face coalesced, hollow where eyes should burn. Robard stared, memories of childhood nightmare flooding. Sam gasped. The first memory, then collapsed, cylinder rolling from limp hand. Eleanor grabbed it, adjusted crystal plates until musical resonance screamed. Mirrors shuddered, some splintering under sound. Gendry shouted for smiths to brace frames. Tyland, pale, drew sword though there was no flesh to stab. Arya stepped to Robard's side. "Needles too small," she murmured. "But hearts bleed at the tiniest cut." She handed him a pouch. Winter barley seeds Sabbatha's line still cultivated. "Scatter life." Robard understood without question. He mounted Emberissa's harness, first time since boyhood had flown anything beyond a parapet's height. The wyvern bucked, but accepted his weight. Arya swung up behind, needle tying her to harness rail. Gendry signaled from shoreline, mirrors swiveling to follow Emberissa's ascent. They rose into cold that burned lungs. Robard felt hammer tug heavy against thigh. Wind screamed. Dome's hum grew deafening. The silhouette within raised an arm. Waves of frost radiated, stabbing Emberissa's wing membranes with needles of ice. She shrieked, but Robard guided her into spiral dive. Sun shafts now glancing off mirrors to chase her path. Gendry's men tracking with practiced precision. Light converged into spear of molten white, punching through Dome just as Emberissa skimmed its surface. Steam exploded. Robard hurled barley seeds into fissure. Arya hurled a thrown dagger coated in ice salt, burying it in spectral chest. The dome convulsed. Silhouette staggered as though stricken, its form collapsing into mist. From shoreline walkers cheered. Too soon. The haze recohered, now swirling around barley, seeds that sprouted mid-air, green shoots rimed with frost yet alive. But the memory twisted, absorbing life to knit new sinew. Arya hissed. "It feeds on opposition." Robard pulled hammer free, whispered to wyvern handlers through signal horns. On shore, smiths ignited pitch barrels, pushed them onto sledges. Ironborn archers knocked ropes to iron hooks. At the signal they launched lines, catching Emberissa mid-hover. She tucked wings, dropping like anchor while archers hauled, forming a pendulum. Robard swung below her, hammer blazing with mirror light reflected off its polished head. With final word to Arya, for the road, he severed harness buckle, free falling into the dome's heart. Time slowed. Hum turned to chorus, memory roaring of glaciers carving valleys, of first men lighting fires. Robard became hammer and breath. He struck the barley-infused fissure. Seed husks burst, releasing life scent that clashed with ancient cold. Light from mirrors split along hammer's runes, scattering into prisms. Dome walls shredded into ribbons. Silhouette howled, a gale of forgotten winters. Frost seized Robert's flesh, but he drove second blow. The crystal cylinder Aelinor had hurled earlier, tethered by chain to Amberissa, slammed beside him, shattering, releasing counter-resonance. Sound met silence. Birth met burial. The memory fractured from within, collapsing into cascade of snow that hissed on lake surface. Shockwave rippled outward, toppling ice towers. Barges rocked. Levee stakes bent. Amberissa, lines cut, sword clear, Arya clinging to her neck, tear tracks freezing on cheeks. She screamed Robards' name, but wind devoured it. Where the dome had stood, only swirling snow remained. Gendry, sprinting onto ice, waded through melt pools, shouting. No answer. Minutes passed like lifetimes before water churned, and a figure emerged, dragging hammer handle like crutch. Frost mapped Robards' skin. His beard shimmered white. Smiths hauled him onto plank. He coughed lake water. Eyes searched until they found Arya dropping from Wyvern's perch. They clasped forearms, neither speaking. Words would crack this fragile living dream. Rains followed for 7 days, melting residual towers, flooding shorelines but sparing villages thanks to emergency canals. Ice readers recorded final shard hum. Subdued, erratic, fading, and when at last sun cleared, the god's eye shone unmarred save a single islet, where barley stems waved, green against black water. Sam, recovered, declared it the seed of dawn. Pilgrims would come for decades, seeking kernels said to sprout in winter snows. Months later, in King's Landing, architects sketched new public square where the Dragon Pit's shadow once dominated. The Dawnforge Plaza, its centerpiece a fountain cast from mixed God's Eye ice and river hammer alloy. Water fell over sculptures of a hammer crossed by needle, then fed channels, cooling communal smithy hearths, encircling plaza. Children played, sprinkling barley kernels into rivulets, watching shoots sprout before drifting out to sea. Tywin Lannister resigned as Lord Treasurer. He would chronicle events instead, Quill humbled. Gendry returned to Storm's End, but took apprentices from every region to teach sunlensing metal tempering. Aelinor founded the School of Resonant Arts, training listeners to catch discord before it crescendoed. Samwell kept a shard locked in Valyrian steel box, label handwritten, "Remember forgetting." Robards' frost burns never fully faded. Veins on arms gleamed faint blue beneath skin. He called them road lines. Proof a king can be map and traveler, he told walkers, gifting his hammer into their vault. The realm now walked itself. Arya refused honors as savior. She slipped from court after ceremonies, leaving behind only needle mounted above council door. Rumor placed her ranging the far hills, teaching street girls to track starlings, or advising the Nightfort scholars, or sailing west of sunset, chasing a wolf's howl. Robard did not search. Some roads turn inward. Years turned. A generation grew that had never seen true war, nor shivered at empty granaries. They read by forge gas lamps, crossed mountains on sky terraces, whispered stories of the ice memory vanquished by light and sea. In village plays the memory took form of a white king shattered by a hammer of dawn. In others, a faceless queen who stitched the world's wound with a single thorn of barley. Either way, carts rolled, canals sloshed, and night never quite forgot to slip into morning. When Robard finally laid down crown, passing it to a council-elected heir, Sebetha Rowan's granddaughter, stern and bright, he walked north alone, cloak patched, staff plain. At the Nightfort he carved a rune on gatepost. Roads remember. Scholars found it next day, puzzled by tool marks finer than any chisel. Some swore they saw footprints continue beyond into forest, pursued by a ghost wolf's shadow, and a second set lighter, dancing in step. And on still evenings by the god's eye, barley fields ripple atop the seed of dawn. Travelers claim they hear twin heartbeats in the wind, one like hammer on anvil, the other whisper thin as a needle-piercing cloth, together keeping time for a realm forged by two souls who chose at every turning, not the blade's glint or crown's weight, but the long quiet labor of the road.